as a DJ, where do you feel like that you need the most help? I asked this question on social media and I got a lot of answers. I thought it would be interesting to kind of look at some of them to see where some people are thinking that they need help. I'm not going to mention any names in here. However, I will mention the first name because I made the first comment. With me, it's probably business related, and it definitely is. There are things that I could improve on business-wise. Just across the board. It's never been my strong point. I don't enjoy it, for one. I enjoy the performance. I feel like I'm a well-rounded DJ as far as, executing the job. But the business part, that part I've never had superpowers with. Other people do really well with it. Some people, that's their main thing. They're great business people. And maybe they're not as well-rounded as a DJ, but they definitely know how to sell their services and get jobs and do their books and their taxes and all that stuff. This is something that I'm just not a rock star with, and I'm self-aware of it. So I made the first comment. Getting speakers I want back order is killing me. That's a supply chain issue, and that's just not in our business. That's cars, that's appliances, that's housing, building materials, food. Have you been to the grocery store lately? There are supply chain issues right now. COVID screwed everything up. I think that we will probably be back on a more normal path with this in the next year or two. It's going to take a while to kind of catch up. And then we should be back to normal. As long as nothing else goofy happens, we should be fine. It's going to take some time, though. In the meantime, we just make the smartest choices we can and do our best. That's what we're all doing. Scheduling and keeping track of schedules for myself and other DJs. To me, in my mind, this sounds like something that should be relatively easy to handle. Now, some people may say that about the business side of things because that's just what they're good at, right? And I understand that because a lot of people are really good at that and maybe not as strong with performance, but really good at the business side of things. In this case, scheduling is a problem here. But I feel like that's pretty easily solved. I mean, there are plenty of apps and programs out there that can help you out with that. So maybe not the heaviest problem we've seen here so far. Music. Every event is different from the other. No one event is always the same. I've been a mobile DJ for over 15 years. I'm always nervous at every single gig. That's programming and having empathy for your audience and kind of understanding what kind of music people like based on some observations that you make. And it's the same thing with audiences. You look at the audience as a whole and kind of make some type of calculated guess as to what might motivate them to do whatever you want them to do. Maybe it's dancing. Maybe it's just chilling out, having cocktails. Maybe it's not falling asleep during dinner. Those are kind of DJ fundamentals. I mean, that's, to me, and in my opinion, should be the thing that you have a pretty strong ability with when you decide to do this at all. And it's not really fair that I say it like that, I guess, because I feel like it comes pretty easy to me where it's tougher for others. But yeah, that's definitely something that you need to I guess, address. And the best way to address it, I think, is probably just to try your best to understand your audience better and the people in your audiences. And that goes to everyday life. I mean, you look at your neighbors, think about what they might like to listen to, and your family and your friends and just the random person you run into at the grocery store. What song might they like? What song might they enjoy based on some observations that you make? Knowing music is important. Knowing people is important. That's the best advice I can give for, even thinking about starting to become a strong music programmer. And a lot of people have the same problem. There's a lot of replies to this. My crowds are incredibly diverse by age and culture. Difficult to keep everyone satisfied with song selection. It's the old people hate modern music, the young people hate oldies kind of thing. Yeah, that's always been the case. I mean, I'm hearing this over 15 years I've been a DJ. I've been a DJ for almost 40, and I'm still doing it. But this has always been. This is not new. What I will tell you, that the other thing that has never changed is there are what I consider polarizing tracks. Always. It's always been this way. There are some new songs that an older crowd will never accept. There are some old songs that a younger crowd will never accept. So I feel like that the best way to address this is to find the songs, like, let's say the new songs, that the older crowd will most likely accept. The same thing with the older songs. Find the older songs that the young crowd will most likely accept. That's your middle ground. You got to have compromise in this. And that's what it's always been about, is compromise. It might not be the younger crowd's favorite song, but they'll like it and the older crowd won't hate it. And vice versa. Might not be the older crowd's favorite song, but the young crowd won't hate it. That's how I think about it anyway. And it's easier said than done. I understand that. I think the number one thing would be, for most DJs, is getting business. Yeah, that can be tough. Marketing, competing out there with other DJs. What are they saying? What are they promising? It's tough. But, really, what I've found has worked best for me is to not only deliver a solid product, but to make sure that my peers understand that I'm delivering a solid product as well, in their opinion. So I have friends. I've got great friends that are DJs. I've got relationships that I've had for well over 30 years. I've got relationships that I've had for probably under 10. And I don't have 50 of these relationships in my market. I have a handful of them. These are people I trust. They trust me. I've got their back. They've got mine. If a gig comes along that they can't handle or that they're booked for, they know they can pass things along to me I'm a solid referral. It looks good for them, and it helps me. It helps the client. Forming these relationships in the business, I feel, is so incredibly important, especially if you're a single owner operator. If you've got like several mobile systems that you're sending out every weekend, you might not have that many friends because you're taking all the work, right? If you're successful. So that might be tough. But if you're a single owner operator, there are plenty of other single owner operators out there that you can network with. You are not going to get along with all of them. Have I been burnt? Yes. Have I been in a situation where I thought I was in a solid relationship and it went sour? Yeah. But you gotta try it. You can't just do it once, get burnt, and say you're never going to do it again. You got to find those good, solid business relationships and friendships with other DJs, I feel like, in your market. And that helps. That's one thing that you can do to help with getting work. There have been times in my career where I didn't have to advertise anything because it just came to me because I was just getting referrals because they knew I was a solid referral. They knew I would handle the client. I would handle the job that I was asked to do. Let's see, what else do we have? Sales and providing my worth. I get a large amount of wedding couples that ghost me after the first contact emails. Yeah, that sales is fun. It just is. It's a lot of fun. And I say that sarcastically. I don't enjoy sales at all. I really don't. Our job is so strange in the regard that, most people, or not most people, but a lot of people, like my dad, for instance. My dad went in for an interview, like in the early 60s, and had the same job until he retired in the 90s. That's not what happens with us. We have to interview every week, every gig. We have to go through this process. It is tough. And then we have to negotiate price, and we have to show our worth to clients. There's help out there for that. There's a lot of, get what you're worth kind of things. And the argument will always be, wow, how come you cost this when this guy over here costs a lot less? Point out what you're doing for him. Are you doing anything different than this guy who costs less is doing? If not, then hey, maybe you're not worth any more than that guy. But you got to point things out, like what you're doing and why you're valuable. You have to build value in your services. The easiest thing to do, without even talking about your abilities as a performer, I feel like, is to talk about things like, the market rate for rental equipment. So you take all of your equipment and you add up the retail price of it and then come up with a rental value for your equipment at the event. You'd be surprised what that number is sometimes. I do a 10% thing with mine, and the number's up there, right? That's my starting point. That's my launch point. And after 10 events, all my equipment's paid for. It's profit after that. But you know what? Profit's not a bad word. We have to profit, otherwise we are all homeless. We have no money to do anything, and we can't help anybody. That's a good start point. Figuring out what your expenses are, what your rental expenses are, and then you can start thinking about your value as an artist and add that on to that. It's easier said than done, but it's kind of how I look at it, I guess. Loading and unloading my equipment. If I had someone to do that for me every job, life would be pure heaven. Yeah, you know what? I obviously have physical issues with my thing that I have going on. And I wanted to keep going. I couldn't keep going with the heavy equipment that I had that was available that everyone was using at the time. Things have gotten much lighter. And they continue to get lighter. More things are coming out that are making my job easier. I'm trying to make the smartest equipment selections possible so I can physically handle this stuff and set it up. The other thing that you kind of have to consider when you're doing this is, customer service. What I mean by that is, some of the things that we have, I think, are more for us than the customer. You have to look at all the things that you have and wonder, are they important to the customer? Or are they important to the DJ? What do they weigh? What's really important to the customer? And what is not important to the customer? What's going on at the event? Is it a social event? If it is, maybe you don't need subwoofers because people need to be able to talk, and maybe that's a little loud. Maybe something smaller would be good. Hey, now you have to carry subs. Oh, that didn't sound good. Anyway, moving on. Let's see. Somebody said that a lot to work on, baby steps. We all do. We all have a lot to work on. We all have things that we want to improve on, and we're all a work in progress. Every single one of us is a work in progress. None of us know it all. We're all learning as we go. Let's see, what else do we have? Okay, technique on scratching. I know the basics from vinyl, but it doesn't work with me on the controller. There were several comments about scratching on here. And I understand that you want to know how to scratch, but I don't know. My opinion, I don't think anybody wants to hear you scratch. If you want to learn how to do it at home, that's cool. Figure it out. But I don't think anybody wants to hear you scratch. It's just what it is. What I will say is that whenever you're working on any mixing technique, any artistic mixing technique, be it beat mixing or scratching or looping or whatever you're doing, what I've found is when you get away from it for a while and then come back to it, it seems to get easier. So let's just talk about beat mixing for a minute. Let's say that you're trying to beat mix on your controller and you're just hitting a brick wall. You can't get any further with it. Try it on records. Try it on your computer. Try it with some other software, and then come back to your controller and see if it got easier. Usually when I do that kind of thing, I'm able to jump a hurdle. I have to look at it from a different perspective. And when I do that, it always just seems like I'm able to move forward. Just looking at it from a different point of view and then coming back to it, for me anyway, helps. And of course, always practice, practice, practice. But again, the good news is there aren't many clients out there that want to hear you scratch anyway, so don't worry about it. Um, let's see. Marketing. Yeah, marketing's tough. Everybody's kind of doing the same things, and really just be good. Be a really good DJ and get your name out there, get a reputation out there that you're good from your peers in your market. That is the workaround for all of the slick marketing stuff, I think. Let's see, what else do we have? Loading and unloading. Again, going back to equipment size, downsizing, understanding what you really need for the job helps so much. I see people set up these giant lighting trusses and have these subwoofers and all this stuff for a 100-person wedding reception. They don't need any of this. They can downsize this a lot. It's a lot easier to load, a lot easier to unload, a lot easier to set up. Ultimately, I feel like it creates a better product for the event. It fits the other event objectives better. What I mean by that is, we can go into an event like a wedding reception and think, okay, yeah, the goal here is to make it loud, make sure everybody hears my music. But is there anything else going on at the event? Maybe that has nothing to do with you, like being social, people talking. If you're preventing people from having a conversation at your event because the music's too loud, maybe you have sabotaged that event. It's not all about the music that you're playing or even what you're saying. It's about other things going on. We need to be able to provide a service, and we also need to be able to not destroy everything else that's going on at the event that needs to happen, like being social. Light shows, lights in people's faces, all these spinning movie lights. Do you need all that? Did anybody ask for it? Could you do some simple washes that aren't blinding anybody, that don't take as many fixtures, that are easier to set up? Would it create a better product ultimately? Would it make your load lighter? Yeah, it would. I know I've done it, and I'm so happy that I've done it. Right now, this is the gospel I'm preaching. I might change my mind down the road, but right now, absolutely. Small arrays, some uplighting style pars that double as dance lights close to the dance floor, strategically placed. I kind of go in guerrilla style and make it happen at every event. It's always a little different. I'm working off the architecture, be it columns, white ceiling, walls, whatever the case might be. Sometimes I walk into a room that's easy to light. Sometimes I'll walk into a room that's hard to light, but I figure it out on the fly. It's definitely an easier setup, easier breakdown, and a lot lighter to carry, even for a cripple like me. And people are loving my product, by the way. I don't have anybody ever saying to me, it's not loud enough, or that light show was lame. It's the opposite. They love the light show, and they love the sound. And they compliment the sound. Unsolicited compliments on the sound, by the way, with small arrays. Let's see. Music organization and duplicates and removing the tracks that I've deleted. So, and still show up. Let's see. Okay, so it sounds like it's a Serato issue. This is stuff that you could probably, figure out. This is technical stuff. You can seek this help and find it. I get another scratching. Performance. Yeah, we all are always improving with performance. I'll go back to what I said earlier. I believe this job is about empathy. I believe this job is about giving the audience the best experience possible, which isn't always, the song. Maybe it's the song in the background. Maybe the song is secondary to what else is going on. It's hard to teach. You either have empathy or you don't for your audience. But if you think of it in those regards, where you're trying to create a well-rounded experience for your audience in every way, including things that you're not providing, like conversation. You don't have to stimulate conversation. People just talk. However, are you somehow limiting conversation with your volumes or your speaker systems or your EQ settings or your output or your MP3 files that maybe aren't very good? Thinking about what they might want and giving it to them is cool. Giving them exactly what they want, I think, is boring when they just give you like this playlist and you play it. Sometimes it's effective, sometimes it's not. I think it's more interesting to anticipate what they might want but didn't think to ask for and give it to them Those are the surprises. Those are the oh wow moments. That's the fun stuff. But we're all working on our performances. But that's really paramount to what we do. We all kind of assume everybody knows how to, play to a room or, read the crowd. A lot of people don't. They've got the business side down. They have some equipment. They're pretty good at marketing, but when it comes to performance, they struggle. I guess I'm glad that I'm struggling with the business side of things instead of the artistic side of things. And I feel for anybody out there who is struggling with performance. It's not an easy thing to teach. You can't teach somebody to be an artist. There's not a school that you can go to learn how to be Madonna or Lady Gaga or Bruce Springsteen or Prince. There's just not. You either have it or you don't. But, there is this thing called artist development. It takes time to come into your own. It took me time to come into my own. I was one thing when I started. I'm something completely different now. Give it time, be patient, be observant, and do your best to have empathy for your audience. I think that's a good start point for that. Let's see what else. A lot of stuff about carrying equipment. Again, it's about downsizing, thinking about what you really need. Understanding today's couples. Most are introverts and have odd expectations. Yeah, I've ran into people before where, I just had a really difficult time communicating with them for one reason or another. Now, what I could do, on one hand, is try my best to empathize with that client and kind of morph into the personality that they want and respond to them in ways that they will have a positive reaction to. You can do that. I will say this, though. I think there's a time when you just need to say enough's enough. And maybe these aren't your clients. Maybe these aren't the people for you. Maybe there's nothing that you say or do that's going to make them happy. Maybe their expectations are so incredibly unrealistic and they're unmovable on them no matter how much you try to talk to them about, how unrealistic their expectations are. That, it's better off just to pass this to someone else. Excuse me. There are a lot of DJs out there who just say, they say yes to anything. Yes, anything to get the gig. Are the clients satisfied with that? I don't know that they always are. I personally don't want anyone in my life who just nods their head at everything I say. I want people who challenge me and give me different points of view, especially if they know more about a subject than I do. We should all know more about how parties work and how audiences work better than the average client. We should know this. We should still listen to our clients, but we should know things just as professionals. If your client doesn't respect you as a professional, maybe they're not your client. Just a thought. There's marketing and social media things. Getting business leads. Yeah, we talked about that a little bit with, making those connections. Age. Somebody who's talking about their age here. They feel like they're aging out of it. There are people up there who are a lot older than I am, old enough to be my dad, and they're still doing this. It's a here thing. I can tell you that as a disabled person, there are people out there who are disabled and don't have the attitude I have, and they have a rather miserable life. I see them in support groups. There's nothing you can say to these people that's going to make them happy. They just are waiting for something magical to happen where everything's going to be okay, and it's not. So they're just going to sit around for the rest of their lives and being miserable. It's all attitude, folks. If I had the wrong attitude, I'd be them. I think you have to be realistic about things. When you get to a place in your life where you're no longer relating to an audience, you don't feel comfortable, you don't feel like you fit, fine. But if you can see your way to understand your audiences and overcome these things, I don't think there's an age limit on this. This is just an individual thing. And I've met some old 20-year-olds. I've met some young 80-year-olds. My mother is a young 81-year-old woman. Wow. If half of the people that I knew younger than me had her attitude, they'd be better off. Mom's favorite band is Maroon 5, by the way. My mom is the coolest. I love my mom. She's awesome. I have to keep up with my mom. It's like that. Let's see. Roadie, getting good help. There's a lot of that. And I struggle with that too. That's why I built the small system, because I couldn't rely on people to show up on time and do what I needed to do. It's also exhausting to talk people through the setup process. It's nice when you have somebody who just knows how to do it and you just let them go and they do it. But if you got a new person all the time, you got to talk them through it. For me, it's just absolutely exhausting. I'd rather just do it myself. It takes less energy to do it myself than it does to talk someone through it. But yeah, good help is tough. And, somebody else had mentioned that too, where they can't find anyone who wants to work. There are a couple of ways to look at that. Back in the old days when I started doing this, if you could land a job at a multi-op DJ company, the one I worked for had like 22 or 24 mobile systems that were out every weekend. That's what you did if you wanted to DJ. You didn't have to own any music. You didn't have to have anything except some clothes and a vehicle to get to the main office. At that point, you got in their truck with their gear and their music and went to an event and did it and came home. That's how you learn how to DJ. Now, if you had money back then, if you could save your money or get a loan or something, you could build your own system and go off on your own because you got like free on-the-job training. Today, it is so feasible to build a system. Music access is very easy with the internet and downloads. Yeah, it's going to be tough to find people who are genuinely interested in being DJs to help you. So here's how I'm looking at it. If you need someone to help you out as a roadie, all right, I would suggest looking at people who are not interested in being DJs. And that might sound crazy because, no, I want to train this person to become one of my DJs. No, that person is going to go off on their own and be a DJ. They're not going to work for you and make money for you. They're going to go off on their own. I would look for people who are hardworking and are not in high-paying jobs. Like someone who's stocking groceries, perhaps. Maybe that's the kind of person you need to look at. They're hardworking. And they're not really ready to be a rock star. That's the kind of person I would look for. And that way you have a good roadie who just goes out with you on these jobs and isn't trying to cut in on your action. The other thing to think about is, maybe it's less about people wanting to work and more about what you're willing to pay these people. Man, there's some people out there in business that do not pay a fair wage, do not pay a livable wage, but expect a lot from their employees. That's changing. That's changing. You got to pay to play, guys. You want good workers, you got to pay them the money. Even if you go get the stock boy, you got to pay that stock boy the money. It can be long days out there being a roadie and lugging your gear around. Even being your assistant on the job. Very long days. Figure out what that is per hour, and figure out what they can make at Burger King per hour. And see if you're paying more or less, I'm doing some consulting work for a company right now. It's a friend of mine. You may have seen the Rockville stuff and the Mopop stuff I've done, the system I built, the tech stuff I've done on some of my other videos. Let me tell you something. I would have done it because he's a friend of mine, but the money that I make doing this makes it worth my while. Okay, even if I didn't know this guy, even if I didn't like this guy, which I do know him and I do like him a lot, I'd still work for him because the money is ridiculous. Money's great. He understands that if he wants quality people, he has to pay a premium. So that's what he does. And I think we could all learn from that, And if raising your employee salary is cutting in on your profit too much, maybe it's time for you to charge more for your services. Everything costs more these days. Everything. Equipment, food, gas, cars, houses, air. Everything costs more. Maybe your DJ services need to cost more too, so you can afford to hire the help that you need. Some rambling thoughts on that one. This is a vlog, by the way, if you haven't figured that out already. God, we've gone almost a half hour on this. Self-promotion. Yeah, that's more of the social media thing. It's tough. Convincing people while I'm double the investment. Well, there you go. You've got to lay it out for them. You got to show them the numbers. Okay? I start with rental. And then I talk about out-of-pocket expenses. And after I talk about all of that, then I say, then I have to pay myself. And usually my clients will go, oh, okay, we understand. That's how I do it. I'll tell about the experience. And when they mention something to me about music or pop culture or whatever it is, I need to come back with a quick answer that makes sense. Like if they mention Molly Hatchet, I gotta say Leonard Skinner. And they're like, oh, you get it. Yeah, I get it. Those are old references, but that's kind of what I mean. You need to appear to be the best candidate for the job, better than anybody else they've talked to, better than the guy who just wants to play the Cupid Shuffle all night. You need to act, you sound like you're the best candidate for the job. I think it's going to be very, very helpful. Creating a business plan. Now, I've done a lot of videos on that, and I've just talked about this with, first figuring out what your expenses are and then thinking about paying yourself. That's a business plan. Figuring out what you want to get out of this. Figuring out how you're going to pay for your equipment. Figuring out all that stuff is a business plan, and it's very helpful. It's not that hard. I mean, I don't think it is to get your head around. You to understand what the business plan is and execute it. Let's see. What else do we have? I'm just looking at a couple things here. I miss doing a gig without all this extra crap. Well, cut it down. I've streamlined. It's possible. What else? I think those are the big ones. New song selections. That's the easiest thing in the world. If you have a good record pool like Top Hits USA or Promo Only, they spoon feed you this stuff. Literally, spoon feed it. Have it. When someone requests it, play it. Or at least preview it and see if it's something that you think might work. It takes maybe a couple hours out of your week to go through some of these songs. Then you also have to figure out what people are going to actually respond well to. There are a lot of hits that no one will ever dance to. That's just always been the case. The key with new music has always been, okay, what do they like, and will I get a good response from? If dancing is your objective, will they actually dance to it, or will it clear the floor? Sometimes a great song clears the floor. A song that they love clears the floor because it's just not a danceable song. There's a lot of tracks out there like that. So I don't play a lot of Drake. Preventing hearing damage. That's something that we all need to worry about. Part of that's tuning your system properly and setting your stuff up right. The other part is, something in your ears. For the longest time, I have been using headphones to do this. I am looking into some actually custom-made earbuds to help this. This is something I may do in the future. Stay tuned for that. But yeah, you can't put a price on your hearing. You're always going to need it, especially as a DJ. As a human being, you're going to want your hearing. So I feel like I've done pretty good. I think I hear pretty good for an old guy. But yeah, hearing protection is definitely important. Let's see. I think that's pretty good. I think we've gone over most of this stuff. This video is long enough. I'm going to stop it. I'm going to upload it. And I'm going to look at some of the things that you guys are saying that you need help with. And maybe address those. So that's it. I'm going to enjoy my coffee and the rest of my rainy Saturday afternoon. I appreciate you so much for tuning in. I appreciate your comments. If you wouldn't mind liking the video, that'd be groovy too. Helps the channel. See you soon. Practice and enjoy.